boy, this will be a tough sell. So you guys may recall some months back on the Trigonometry podcast, a neoliberal moron over here, Sam Harris, decided to tarnish his own reputation into smithereens by displaying a colossal mountain of Trump derangement retardation and saying it doesn't matter how corrupt Hunter Biden was, it wasn't Joe, there could have been dead kids in the basement for all he cared. Who the hell cares? Now this moron has decided to put his foot in his mouth yet again and say this shit.
Take it back to COVID for a second. In one way, and we got very lucky that COVID wasn't worse than it was, right? You know, it could have been much, much worse. It could have been 10 times as deadly or 50 times as deadly, and we would have lived through, or many of us wouldn't have lived through, something truly awful. But had COVID been worse, just enough worse to really get our attention, to really be undeniable, we would have had a different political conversation around it. There wouldn't have been the same kind of vaccine skepticism. Brett Weinstein would not have been releasing 80 straight podcasts on the dangers of the vaccine if a few variables were changed. I mean, just take that, leave COVID exactly as it is, but just make it preferentially dangerous to children rather than to old people, right? You just flip that around, the variable of age. If kids were dying by the hundreds of thousands from COVID at a rate of whatever it was, 1%, say, but if it was pretty much all kids, we would have had a very different experience, right? And the patience, that there would have been no fucking patience for vaccine skepticism, right? And everyone would have recognized that this is not my body, my choice. This is, you're not going to kill my kids with your ignorance, right? And you change one other variable. What if the vaccines actually really did block transmission much better than they in fact did, right? And there was a moment where it was only rational to expect them to block transmission. Turns out they don't do it nearly as much as we would hope at this point. They just shorten the window by which, during which transmission is possible. If they're even doing that now, I don't know. But let's say the vaccines really did block transmission, but then nothing else was, all of the other mishigas about how, untested they are and how dangerous they yet might be, and the spike protein and blah, blah, blah. Leave all that in place. Just give me a little more transmission blockage and give me kids being preferentially killed or injured by this disease. The obscenity of much of what was said, much of what was said about COVID at the time at which it was said, the conspiracy thinking, the platforming of people who were obviously unwell and unbalanced professionally and mentally around vaccines and their skepticism, the patience for that would have been non-existent, right? And so in some sense we got unlucky at how benign this was and how mysterious it could yet seem, because you could run the argument, well, did he die from COVID or with COVID? He was 80 years old, right? That was the situation we were in. I'm saying that there are changes in the real world that could have happened and could yet happen that would have been immensely clarifying, right? And there would have been no less. I'm just asking questions routine would have not gotten anyone anywhere worth going, right? And that's I think part of what we're talking about here is, with respect to Trump and with respect to COVID, are just contingent facts of these, unique situations, which had they been a little bit different, we wouldn't have fragmented in the same way, right? You dial up the risk of COVID, or if COVID just had been, just made you physically ugly, right? Like if COVID was monkeypox, right?
Okay,
and you had pustules on your.
Now, again, normally I'd present my argument first before I go for the jugular, but I am far too pissed off to go for that route, so I'll start by saying, fuck Sam Harris, he's a fucking psychopath. Now, sorry, give me a moment, there was so much BS in this man's statement, I'm struggling to find a good starting point over here. Okay, start with the politicization argument. Harris is not particularly bright outside of his wheelhouse, Dunning-Krugering like a monster over here, but he doesn't quite seem to understand how the US government structure actually works. Each state handled the situation differently, hence why Florida went hard red, and dim-witted dipshits like New York and California set themselves on fire and went pants-on-head retarded with nonsensical government intervention. DeSantis himself said the game plan that he initially received had some mismanagement of resources, according to the data, so he changed it according to what he could see. Politically, this was a gamble, which in itself is a rather damning statement that following data you see in real time could cost you politically, but anyway, DeSantis used science instead of following the science, and Florida weathered the storm probably better than any other state in the union. Whereas again, states like New York and Cali did follow the science narrative, and like I said before, the narrative is not driven by facts and data. It's driven by emotion and believability. And when you're dealing with facts, actual raw hard data, they don't gel very well. Hey, that rhymed. Secondly, the coup was a worldwide phenomenon. The politicians do not at all matter. What matters is the policies they choose to implement. And even then, the policies only matter if the freaking media is pumping out its narrative in conjunction with it. Heaven's sake, Biden said he was gonna shut down the virus. Remember that crap? There was more information and medication, when Biden attained higher office, shall we say. This is the same dude who said given the amount of people who perished under Trump's reign, he should no longer be president. Oh, and then more people died under him than Trump, and no one in the press said jack freaking shit. So to politicize this and somehow place the blame on Trump for the fracturing of society, as Sam says, is illogical and insane. This needs to be said as well. This is something that really bugs me. With the politicization of everything, all you're doing is you're further dialing up the animus already inherent in democracy. You're cranking up the tribalism. And when it's trying to mix with raw data, again, it doesn't gel well. Politics is not a hard science. Again, it's driven by emotion and believability. It's why culture and stories are seen as valuable tools in this regard. You need to keep them separate. Otherwise, you run this danger that I see a lot of people do, which is when someone has that clear political identity and they're trying to contort the facts to suit their politics, and I've spoken about that before, because of the amped up tribalism, they run a very high risk of rapidly demolishing their own credibility entirely because this one position they hold is so utterly illogical. It's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And here's another thing to note as well. If you're familiar with the term glowy, it's used to describe usually people within the intelligence apparatus or events that could potentially be orchestrated by the state in order to galvanize public opinion to justify government's expansion to further its own agenda. I think you can make a case that academia sort of have their own version of this. The intelligentsia, really, the sort of clique where they will defend the political position at the expense of damn near any rationality, or their credibility in some cases. They're not exactly gatekeepers, they're more... You could call them the intellectual vanguard of the regime. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of them, Sam Harris is another. I suppose this is the one good thing about the tribalism, is that when you have people like these yahoos go to bat for the regime, it's glaringly overt and easily recognizable. At least for the people who have any sense and are paying attention to them. The people who like their position already, well, they're just reinforcing the feedback loop. His position makes no sense at all, by the way. Hell, even the words he used make no sense. You're not going to kill my kids with your ignorance. What on earth are you talking about, Sam? That's another word I've noticed that's lost its meaning, ignorance. It's become synonymous with stupid. Stupid means you lack thinking prowess. Ignorance means a lack of knowledge. You can be smart and still be ignorant on a topic that's perfectly compatible. I could rant off all the media and CDC talking points I want, but if I recite lies, I'm still wrong. My stubbornness to not adhere to the narrative is not born out of ignorance. No, my skepticism is based on mistrust, which looking at it now was entirely justified. Oh, if only things were completely 180 from how they actually were, people would have reacted differently. No fucking shit, Sam. What a stupid thing to say. But let me ask you, what do you think was his motivation for saying this? Because if I'm to understand this, he seems pissed off that people were allowed free thought and to question things. Just what are the conditions and variables necessary in order to ensure compliance? Shame it wasn't killing kids and not having to lie about transmissibility, never mind the long-term consequences we don't know about. That would have been so much easier. So again, he seems to not really give a damn about anything other than the compliance. Because what caused the social fracturing in Sam's demented mind is not the overreaching psychotic nature of the state. Oh, no. It was you. If you were the one that noticed that damn near the entire world was following lockstep in line with the totalitarian state of China like some sort of disturbing New World Order, One World Government type of testing scenario, if you noticed the so-called efficacy was dwindling down over and over and over again over the course of several months, if you noticed the stupid thing was already trending downward before the face blanky ass wipe was implemented, if you noted the largest wealth transfer in the history of our entire species as massive MNCs had their competitors crushed out of existence by the authoritarian overreach of the state because for some reason the coup doesn't affect them, if you noted how the media lied about the stupid thing, how Biden lied that you wouldn't end up in hospital or die, if you noticed the main comorbidity was obesity, yet no one in the media said to lose weight ever, if you noticed how the pharmaceutical companies were making gobs of dosh hand over fist, if you noticed how the numbers were fudged on with and from in order to scare people into getting the stupid thing, or how they would bribe people with junk food and money and to return to normal freedom that we had just over a frickin' year ago, if you noticed how the elite at G7 adhered to none of the rules they demanded everyone else should follow, if you noticed how questioning all of this BS would make you a target on social media, if you noticed all of these giant red flags all over the freaking place, and you flipped them off and told them to go to hell, if you dared have the temerity to exercise that noodle we call a brain and refuse to comply with this draconian BS, then you sexy pure-blooded human you are a problem, according to shitheads like Sam Harris. What lurks behind the academic facade of this creature is an authoritarian, a cold-blooded psychopath. Sam Harris is an evil man, plain and simple. Bollocks to him. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.